The world was loud, still I crossed every distance for you, my future wife. Stay with me for a moment, don't scroll yet, because this isn't a story about noise or chaos, it's about what happens inside a person who learns how to listen when everything around them is shouting. The world has always been loud. Loud with opinions, expectations, timelines, comparisons, urgency. Loud with people telling you who to be, how fast to move, what matters, what doesn't. I lived in that noise for a long time. I learned how to function inside it. I learned how to move quickly, how to stay focused, how to protect my attention like it was oxygen. And for a while, I thought that was strength. Listen carefully. When the world is loud long enough, you stop noticing the volume. You adapt. You learn to filter, to prioritize, to cut things out. You convince yourself that distance is efficiency, that emotional quiet is distraction, that slowing down is dangerous. I told myself I didn't need much. I told myself connection could wait. I told myself that if something really mattered, it would find me without effort. That was a comfortable lie. Stay right here. Because what I didn't realize was that the louder the world became, the quieter my inner life got. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. The kind where you're constantly busy but rarely present. The kind where you're surrounded by people but still feel unseen. The kind where you're successful on paper but something inside you feels untouched. I didn't know how far I had drifted from myself until you appeared. Don't scroll now. You didn't enter my life as another voice competing for attention. You didn't demand space. You didn't raise your volume to be heard. You were steady. Clear. Present. And that presence cut through the noise in a way nothing else ever had. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't announce itself. It just felt different. Like something real in a room full of echoes. Stay with me. At first, I tried to keep you at the same distance I kept everything else. Not out of disinterest, but out of habit. My life was built on efficiency. On movement. On momentum. Slowing down felt irresponsible. Letting something matter felt risky. But the more the world demanded my attention, the more I noticed myself thinking about you in the quiet moments. Not obsessively. Honestly. Listen carefully. Crossing distance doesn't always look like travel. Sometimes it looks like unlearning. Like choosing to respond instead of retreat. Like staying in a conversation when it would be easier to disappear into work. Like letting yourself be affected instead of staying neutral. Every time I chose presence over distraction, I crossed a distance I didn't even know I'd built. Stay right here. The world was loud, yes, but my defenses were louder. Years of learning how to stay composed, how to be unaffected, how to keep my emotions organized and contained. Those defenses kept me functioning. They also kept me isolated. You didn't challenge them directly. You didn't ask me to tear them down. You just didn't play along with them. And that quietly changed everything. Don't skip this. I crossed distance not because you chased me, but because you didn't. You stayed rooted in yourself. You lived your life with dignity and direction. You didn't try to shrink or bend to fit into my schedule. And that forced me to choose. Either keep protecting my distance or step toward something that felt real but unfamiliar. Stay with me. Stepping toward you didn't happen all at once. It happened in small decisions. Choosing to listen more carefully. Choosing to slow my pace when I was with you. Choosing to let silence exist without filling it. Choosing to be present without multitasking. Those choices felt small, but they required more courage than anything I'd done loudly. Listen carefully. I started to notice how different my body felt around you. How my shoulders dropped. How my mind stopped racing. How the constant background urgency softened. I didn't feel pulled away from my life. I felt more inside it. That's when I understood something important. Real connection doesn't compete with purpose. It clarifies it. Stay right here. The world kept shouting. Deadlines didn't disappear. Responsibilities didn't pause. Expectations didn't lower their voices. But somehow, crossing distance toward you made the noise less controlling. I stopped letting urgency decide everything. I stopped confusing motion with meaning. I stopped treating stillness like a threat. Don't scroll now. There were moments when crossing that distance scared me. Moments when I felt exposed. When I questioned whether I was ready to let something rearrange my priorities. Distance had always been safe. Distance meant control. Distance meant I could leave without explanation. But closeness asked something else of me. It asked me to stay. Stay with me. Staying didn't mean abandoning who I am. It meant allowing who I am to be seen without armor. It meant admitting that I wanted connection without pretending it was an inconvenience. It meant letting go of the idea that independence requires emotional isolation. That shift wasn't loud. It was internal. And it changed how I moved through everything else. Listen carefully. Crossing distance for you didn't mean crossing oceans or borders. It meant crossing habits. Patterns. Reflexes. The instinct to withdraw when something feels meaningful. The tendency to intellectualize instead of feel. The comfort of being unavailable. Each time I chose differently, I crossed another distance. Stay right here. I realized that the world being loud wasn't the problem. The problem was letting the noise decide what deserved my attention. You didn't ask me to silence the world. You reminded me that I could choose where to listen. And once I chose you, even quietly, the noise lost its authority. Don't skip this. I didn't cross distance because you promised certainty. I crossed distance because you offered steadiness. You didn't rush me. You didn't pressure me. You didn't demand answers I wasn't ready to give. You simply stayed consistent. And consistency is powerful when you're used to chaos. Stay with me. I don't know what the future looks like in detail. I've stopped pretending I need to. What I know is that crossing distance taught me something about myself. That I'm capable of slowing down. That I'm capable of choosing presence over protection. That I'm capable of letting something matter even when the world keeps shouting for my attention. Listen carefully. If the world is loud for you too, if you feel pulled in 1,000 directions, if you've learned to survive by staying distant, know this. Distance isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just habit. And habits can be changed when something real asks you to step closer. Stay right here. Crossing distance doesn't end the noise. It gives you an anchor inside it. Something steady to return to. Something that reminds you who you are when everything else is demanding who you should be. That's what you became for me. Not an escape from the world, but a grounding within it. Don't scroll now. This isn't a dramatic confession. It's a quiet truth. The world was loud, and still, I crossed every distance that mattered. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But honestly. And if this spoke to you, if you felt the pace slow while reading it, take a moment and like this. Subscribe if you want to stay in conversations like this, where nothing is rushed and presence matters. And if you want to, leave a comment. Just a few words. I'll understand. Stay with me a little longer. When I say I crossed every distance, I don't mean the distance ended. I mean I stopped letting it decide for me. Because distance has a way of disguising itself as wisdom. It tells you you're being careful, that you're protecting your time, your energy, your heart. And sometimes that's true. But other times, distance is just fear wearing a reasonable face. I didn't see the difference at first. I had to feel it. Listen carefully. After I stepped closer, after I let you matter in a way I hadn't planned for, the world didn't suddenly get quieter. If anything, it got louder. Expectations didn't pause out of respect for my feelings. Demands didn't soften. Life didn't rearrange itself to make room for tenderness. But something inside me changed. I stopped letting the noise dictate where my attention lived. That shift wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate. Stay right here. I noticed how often I'd used busyness as a shield. How full schedules gave me an excuse to stay unavailable. How productivity made emotional distance look respectable. I was good at that. Too good. And when I chose to stay connected to you instead of retreating into motion, I felt exposed in a way that wasn't comfortable at first. Exposure always feels risky when you've learned how to hide in plain sight. Don't scroll now. There were moments I questioned myself. Moments I wondered if crossing distance was irresponsible, if caring deeply would cost me momentum, clarity, control. Those doubts didn't come from logic alone. They came from habit. From years of believing that closeness slows you down. But what I started to see was this. Distance hadn't made me free. It had just made me efficient and lonely at the same time. Stay with me. I crossed distance every time I chose to respond instead of delay. Every time I stayed in a conversation instead of ending it early. Every time I admitted uncertainty instead of pretending I had answers. Those choices felt small, almost invisible to anyone watching from the outside. But internally, they were revolutions. They required me to unlearn reflexes that once felt like survival. Listen carefully. The world kept pulling at me. Notifications. Obligations. The pressure to move faster, decide sooner, optimize everything. And yet, when I was with you, I felt no urgency to perform. No need to compress myself into something manageable. I could arrive as I was. Not impressive. Not efficient. Just present. That kind of presence was unfamiliar, and unfamiliar things always feel risky before they feel safe. Stay right here. I began to understand that crossing distance isn't about eliminating fear. It's about choosing what matters more than fear. Fear told me to stay guarded. Presence asked me to stay honest. Fear promised control. Presence offered depth. And depth, I've learned, doesn't come without vulnerability. Don't skip this. There were nights I lay awake thinking about how easy it would be to retreat back into my old patterns. To stay busy. To stay vague. To keep my life streamlined and untouched. That version of me was respected. It was admired. It also felt hollow in ways I didn't want to admit. Crossing distance meant risking that image. It meant choosing authenticity over approval. Stay with me. I crossed distance when I stopped needing everything to make sense before allowing myself to care. When I accepted that not all clarity comes before commitment. Sometimes clarity follows action. Sometimes you step closer and understanding meets you there. Waiting for perfect certainty is another way of staying still. Listen carefully. You didn't ask me to cross distance loudly. You didn't ask for declarations or promises that echoed. You asked for consistency without even asking. You showed me what it looks like to stay grounded in yourself while leaving space for someone else. That example did more than any conversation ever could. Stay right here. I realized that the loudest thing in my life wasn't the world. It was my own avoidance. The way I'd learned to justify distance with logic. To intellectualize emotions until they felt manageable. To keep everything slightly theoretical so nothing could touch me too deeply. Crossing distance meant letting theory turn into experience. Don't scroll now. There were moments when closeness brought discomfort. When I felt seen in ways I couldn't curate. When silence felt heavier because it wasn't empty anymore. That discomfort didn't mean something was wrong. It meant something was real. Reality has texture. It has weight. It asks you to participate. Stay with me. I crossed distance by allowing myself to be affected. By letting your presence influence my mood, my pace, my priorities. I used to think being affected was weakness. Now I know it's engagement. You can't stay untouched and still call something meaningful. Listen carefully. The world being loud taught me how to survive. You taught me how to listen. And listening is different from hearing. Hearing is passive. Listening requires choice. It requires attention. It requires you to quiet something inside yourself so another voice can land. That's a distance most people never cross. Stay right here. I didn't abandon my responsibilities. I didn't disappear from my life. I simply stopped letting urgency override everything else. I stopped treating connection like a distraction and started seeing it as grounding. Something that made the noise easier to navigate, not harder. Don't skip this. Crossing distance doesn't end struggle. It changes your relationship to it. When you're anchored to something real, struggle doesn't feel like chaos. It feels like movement. Like effort toward something that matters. That makes all the difference. Stay with me. I don't claim I crossed every distance perfectly. I hesitated. I pulled back at times. I questioned myself. But each time, I returned. And return is what matters. Anyone can step forward once. Staying willing to return is where intention shows itself. Listen carefully. If you're reading this and feeling the weight of your own distances, the ones you built to survive, the ones that now feel heavy, know this. Distance can be crossed slowly. Gently. Without drama. You don't have to tear down everything at once. You just have to choose not to let habit make every decision. Stay right here. The world is still loud. It probably always will be. But now I know this. Noise doesn't get to decide what I care about. Distance doesn't get to define my capacity for closeness. I crossed what mattered, not to escape the world, but to stay human inside it. Don't scroll now. This isn't the end of the story. It's the continuation of a choice. A choice to listen. A choice to stay present. A choice to cross distance again tomorrow, and the day after, in ways that don't announce themselves but change everything. Stay with me. Stay with me again. After you cross distance once, you start to notice how many distances still exist. Not in a discouraging way, but in a clarifying one. You become aware of the subtle spaces you used to ignore. The pauses you rushed through. The feelings you named too quickly just to move past them. Crossing distance teaches you how much of life happens in between, in the moments you once treated as empty. Listen carefully. I realize that distance isn't only about absence. Sometimes it lives inside presence. You can be physically near someone and still remain far away emotionally. You can share time without sharing yourself. I did that for years without realizing it. I thought proximity was enough. I thought showing up counted as connection. But connection asks for something deeper. It asks you to let yourself be known beyond function. Stay right here. I started noticing how often I'd keep parts of myself reserved, even when I was present. How I'd stay thoughtful but not vulnerable. Engaged but not open. That reserve felt safe. It kept me from being misunderstood or disappointed. But it also kept me from being fully met. Crossing distance meant loosening that reserve, little by little, until honesty felt less threatening than silence. Don't scroll now. There's a fear that comes with letting yourself be seen consistently. Not just once, but over time. Because one moment of vulnerability can be dismissed as an exception. Consistent openness becomes your truth. And truth asks to be responded to. I had to accept that if I wanted something real, I had to be real in ways that couldn't be retracted easily. Stay with me. The world was still loud. People still expected things from me. Life still moved fast. But I began to move differently within it. I stopped treating emotional presence like something extra I'd get to later. I stopped scheduling connection as if it were a task. I let it exist alongside everything else, not in competition with it. Listen carefully. I crossed distance every time I resisted the urge to multitask while listening. Every time I stayed focused instead of drifting. Every time I allowed silence to stretch without filling it. Those moments don't look impressive from the outside. But inside, they create safety. And safety is what allows people to open up without fear. Stay right here. I learned that crossing distance also meant letting go of certain narratives about myself. The one that said I was better alone. The one that said I didn't need much. The one that said closeness was optional. Those narratives had protected me once, but they were outdated. Holding on to them felt less like wisdom and more like limitation. Don't skip this. There were moments when I felt the weight of being seen. When I missed the ease of anonymity. When staying open felt heavier than retreating. But each time I considered pulling back, I asked myself what I was actually protecting. Most of the time, it wasn't my well-being. It was my comfort. And comfort has a way of keeping you small if you let it lead. Stay with me. I began to understand that crossing distance doesn't mean you never need space. Space is healthy. It gives you perspective. Distance, though, is different. Distance is space with fear attached. Space allows return. Distance assumes separation. Learning the difference changed how I asked for what I needed without disappearing. Listen carefully. I stopped using silence as a shield. I started using words, even imperfect ones. I learned that clarity doesn't have to be sharp to be honest. Sometimes it's gentle. Sometimes it's tentative. But it's still clarity. And clarity builds trust faster than control ever could. Stay right here. I crossed distance when I allowed myself to be affected by your presence in ordinary ways. When your mood mattered to me. When your absence registered. When your words lingered. I used to think those signs meant I was losing balance. Now I see they meant I was engaged. Don't scroll now. Engagement doesn't weaken you. It grounds you. It reminds you that you're part of something beyond your own internal world. That you can give and receive without keeping score. That you can care without losing yourself. Those lessons don't come from theory. They come from experience. Stay with me. I'm learning that the loudness of the world doesn't have to drown out what's quiet and true. You don't have to match the world's pace to be relevant. You don't have to stay distant to stay strong. Strength can look like attention. Like consistency. Like choosing to stay present when everything else urges you to rush. Listen carefully. Crossing distance also taught me patience. Not the kind that waits passively, but the kind that stays engaged without forcing outcomes. Patience that allows growth to happen organically. That kind of patience feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to controlling timelines. But it's where trust deepens. Stay right here. I realized that what scared me about closeness wasn't loss. It was responsibility. Responsibility to care. To respond. To show up even when it was inconvenient. Distance had given me plausible deniability. Closeness asked for accountability. And accountability, when chosen freely, feels meaningful instead of heavy. Don't skip this. I crossed distance when I stopped asking whether something would last and started asking whether it was real right now. Longevity isn't built by prediction. It's built by presence. By how you treat moments when nothing dramatic is happening. Those moments are the true test. Stay with me. I'm still crossing distances. It's not a single journey with an endpoint. It's a practice. A series of choices. Each day offers new spaces where I can either retreat or lean in. I don't always choose perfectly. But I choose consciously now. And that makes all the difference. Listen carefully. If you're listening to this and recognizing your own distances, the ones you built to cope, the ones that now feel isolating, know this. Crossing distance doesn't require a dramatic leap. It starts with attention. With honesty. With the willingness to stay present just a little longer than you used to. Stay right here. The world will remain loud. That's not changing. What can change is where you place your focus. What you decide deserves your time, your care, your presence. I crossed distance not to escape noise, but to choose meaning within it. Don't scroll now. This isn't about arriving somewhere final. It's about continuing to choose connection over avoidance. Day after day. Moment after moment. That's how distance slowly turns into closeness, and closeness into something that lasts. Stay with me. Stay with me until the end. This is where everything I've been saying stops circling and finally lands. Not in certainty, not in a dramatic conclusion, but in truth that feels settled. Crossing distance didn't suddenly make life simpler. It made it more honest. And honesty has weight. It asks you to stand still long enough to feel what you've been carrying, and brave enough to decide what you're willing to keep carrying forward. Listen carefully. I used to believe that distance protected me from disappointment. That if I didn't lean in too much, I wouldn't fall too hard. That logic sounded mature. Responsible. But what it actually did was keep me from experiencing the fullness of anything. When you never fully arrive, you never fully live. Crossing distance taught me that disappointment isn't the real danger. Numbness is. Stay right here. The world is still loud. It didn't soften its voice because I chose closeness. Deadlines still exist. Expectations still press in. People still want things. But something fundamental shifted. The noise stopped feeling like it owned me. I stopped letting urgency dictate every decision. I stopped confusing being needed everywhere with being fulfilled anywhere. Don't scroll now. There's a quiet strength in choosing where you place your attention. Attention is your real currency. And for a long time, I spent it everywhere except where it mattered most. I gave it to outcomes, to productivity, to staying ahead. Crossing distance meant reclaiming that attention and investing it in something human. Something grounding. Something that didn't demand performance. Stay with me. I learned that closeness doesn't collapse your world. It reorganizes it. It shows you what's essential and what was just noise disguised as importance. Some things fell away naturally. Not because they were wrong, but because they were no longer central. That kind of clarity doesn't come from thinking harder. It comes from caring differently. Listen carefully. I don't romanticize the journey. There were moments of doubt. Moments when retreat felt easier. Moments when the old comfort of distance tempted me back. But every time I considered going back to that version of myself, I asked a simple question. Was I protecting my peace, or avoiding my depth? That question kept me honest. Stay right here. Depth doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels heavy. Sometimes it feels exposing. Sometimes it feels like standing without a script. But depth is where meaning lives. Shallow comfort fades quickly. Meaning stays, even when it challenges you. Don't skip this. Crossing distance didn't make me fearless. It made me willing. Willing to be seen without guarantees. Willing to stay when things were quiet instead of dramatic. Willing to let someone matter without needing to control the outcome. That willingness changed how I move through everything else. Stay with me. I also learned that closeness doesn't mean losing yourself. That fear kept me distant for years. I thought if I let someone in fully, I'd disappear. But the opposite happened. I became more myself. Not the defended version. The honest one. The one who doesn't need to hide behind constant motion. Listen carefully. Distance had given me identity. Being unavailable. Being busy. Being composed. Those traits were praised. They also kept me alone in subtle ways. Crossing distance required letting go of an image. Letting go of being admired for being untouched. And in exchange, I gained something quieter but far more sustaining. Connection. Stay right here. I stopped measuring my life only by output. I started paying attention to how it felt. How my body responded. How my breath slowed. How my thoughts softened. Those changes weren't dramatic, but they were real. They told me I was finally living from the inside instead of performing from the outside. Don't scroll now. There's a lesson here that matters beyond us. You don't have to silence the world to cross distance. You don't have to escape your life. You just have to stop letting noise decide what's worthy of your care. You choose that. Quietly. Repeatedly. Stay with me. Crossing distance didn't happen once. It keeps happening. Every time I choose conversation over avoidance. Every time I stay present instead of disappearing emotionally. Every time I allow myself to be affected instead of staying neutral. Those choices don't make headlines. They build something durable. Listen carefully. I no longer chase certainty. I value consistency. Certainty breaks when life changes. Consistency adapts. Consistency shows up on ordinary days. Consistency stays when nothing is exciting. That's the kind of closeness that lasts. Stay right here. I don't promise perfection. I don't promise I'll never hesitate. I promise return. I promise effort. I promise honesty when it would be easier to hide behind distance. Those promises don't sound poetic, but they're real. And real is what endures. Don't skip this. If you've lived behind distance too, if you learn to survive by staying guarded, by staying busy, by staying slightly removed, know this. Distance is understandable. But it doesn't have to be permanent. You can cross it at your own pace. Without drama. Without announcements. Just by choosing to stay a little longer in moments that matter. Stay with me. The world will stay loud. That's not changing. What can change is where you place your attention, your care, your presence. I crossed every distance that mattered, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. And honesty always costs less in the long run than avoidance. Listen carefully. If something in you softened while reading this, if the pace slowed instead of accelerated, that's not an accident. That's what happens when truth is allowed to land without force. Stay right here. This isn't the end of the journey. It's the commitment to keep choosing closeness over habit, presence over protection, meaning over noise. Again and again. And if this spoke to you, if it felt like a quiet companion instead of another loud message, take a moment and like this. Subscribe if you want to stay in conversations like these, where nothing is rushed and presence matters. And if you want to, leave a comment. Just a few words. I'll understand. Comment your words.